We saw wrestling today break out at the United States Supreme Court. It was almost a 3-hour oral argument scheduled for 45 minutes. What was on the docket? It was supposed to be about nationwide injunctions and whether federal courts have the power to use that as part of their arsenal. One federal judge sitting in one federal district blocking unconstitutional or statutorily violative behavior of a president or of anybody, rather than having to go through the process of suing in hundreds, if not thousands of federal courts to get a different ruling. Or does that have to be done through what's called a class action vehicle? That was on full display today during the oral argument in front of, brought by the 14 states against the Trump administration on birthright citizenship. But the substance of the underlying appeal, who is an American? Is an American somebody that's born on U.S. soil as provided for and guaranteed and enshrined in our Constitution? Or is it who Donald Trump says an American is? Is Donald Trump going to be allowed through an executive order signed on his first day to create an entire class, or to use the phrase today at the oral arguments, an entire bucket of citizenless children who are rejected by the home countries of their own parents because they weren't born there, and are rejected by the United States because they were born here? What are they going to do? Go live at the airport like Tom Hanks in that movie because they don't have a passport and they don't have a country? So we had that. We had two major arguments going on because the Supreme Court has decided, and Donald Trump, in his infinite wisdom of pressing a losing hand, he wanted the court to decide whether federal judges have the right to block him one at a time in a nationwide injunction or not. And he did it through the vehicle of the birthright citizenship case, not the one I would have chosen. That's the worst case for Donald Trump to have brought that up. And we saw it on full display for 2.5 hours at the United States Supreme Court. You're on Legal AF. We did a live version of it. We had 10,000 people with us in the live chat. We did a post-game show as well. We're going to do that right here on Legal AF. Take a moment and vote yes for that kind of content by hitting the subscribe button. Let's get into the oral argument. There's so much to talk about. What did we see going on at the court? Fundamentally, there is a group of United States Supreme Court justices who do not believe in nationwide injunctions, and they are led by Gorsuch. There are others on the United States Supreme Court that believe the proper vehicle for addressing a class-wide injury, like an executive order trying to rip away birthright citizenship, is through what we call a class action under Rule 23 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Others say that's ridiculous because it's very hard, and there's so many different hurdles that Congress never envisioned when it created the class action vehicle. It's not proper for a class action. It's better to have a nationwide injunction that gets taken up on appeal to a circuit court of appeal, and then up to the United States Supreme Court. So you had that battle going on. And then you had the context, the backdrop of the birthright citizenship issue, which is fundamentally not up on appeal, but was discussed at length during the oral argument about the appeal. If you're confused, I'm gonna sort it out right now. The only issue that the Supreme Court justices wanted to really hear and spent most of their time talking about is whether a federal judge has the power to issue a nationwide, universal, cosmic injunction. If he doesn't, what they wanted to know, what are the alternatives? Can we use class action? Can we use what they kept referring to as a bill of peace? What can we use? Because they all agreed that it's got to get to the United States Supreme Court one way or the other on the substance. But they see that there are incentives for bad behavior if you do it in a certain way other than a nationwide injunction, such as Donald Trump has no incentive to bring it up to the United States Supreme Court because he'll just continue to enforce. If he doesn't have a nationwide injunction against him, why bother taking it to the Supreme Court? He's got what he wants in many, many states, and will be years before it gets to the Supreme Court. That didn't seem to appeal to anybody on the Supreme Court. So here's where I think the consensus is. After watching John Sauer, Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, appellate lawyer, get grilled by Elena Kagan, Sotomayor, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and even Amy Coney Barrett, I think this is where the court lies. I think the court ends up issuing an order, which we'll see over the summer, an opinion that's going to give some limits to nationwide injunctions, but is going to say in particular circumstances, including birthright citizenship, the use of a nationwide injunction by one federal judge is appropriate. But with maybe some factors and some tests that has to be satisfied, they're going to give some limiting instructions to federal judges in the use of nationwide injunctions moving forward. Although I think this particular case on birthright citizenship is the reason why you want a nationwide injunction, to get the case completely, as they called it throughout the oral argument today, percolated, so that it's fully and ripe and up at the Supreme Court for ruling quickly. Because we got babies being born while we're dithering and dicking around about the fine points and the niceties of procedural posture. We have potentially citizenless children being born as I'm doing this hot take under that scenario. So one, I think they're going to issue an order. I don't know if it's going to be 5-4, 6-3, 7-2, something like that, limiting nationwide injunctions. There's going to be a couple, Alito and Thomas, who are going to jump off sides, maybe Gorsuch. They're going to say under no circumstances should there ever be nationwide injunctions. But I think the majority is going to find with limits, this is what they can do. There'll be a new factor test coming out of it. That's one. On the merits of the birthright citizenship, it's very interesting. Even though it wasn't the topic du jour, it wasn't on the docket for today technically, they had to talk about it. You know, it was the elephant in the room, to paraphrase Ketanji Brown Jackson. They had to address, are we going to rip the beating heart of birthright citizenship enshrined in our Constitution out because of an executive order by Donald Trump in his misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution? And they said it aloud. John Sowers started his oral argument, the Solicitor General of the United States for Donald Trump, the same way he ended it. 14th Amendment was created for slavery. It was for former slaves to have citizenship. Yeah, that may have been the historical basis. All of the Reconstruction amendments, the 14th, the 15th, the 16th, up to the 18th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution came out of the Civil War era and Reconstruction, John. We understand that. What's your point? It only applies to them? Only to former slaves are the only one who can claim citizenship under the 14th Amendment? It's ridiculous. But he did start and end with that. I think the consensus is, I believe, that Donald Trump's not going to be able to use an executive order to rip away birthright citizenship when it finally gets to the Supreme Court. The question is, when is that going to get there? I mean, look, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Kagan, Sotomayor clearly are going to vote against destroying birthright citizenship. Amy Coney Barrett is going to join them. I think Roberts joins them as well. And Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, maybe, when it finally gets to them under the right procedural posture, whatever that's going to be. So I think 7-2, probably 8-1. It's when they finally get the matter before them next term, next year, 2 years from now, when they make the ruling on birthright citizenship. I think that Donald Trump doesn't have the votes to rip out. And that's a good thing. And all the babies that are born now and in the future can rest easy. And their mothers and parents can rest easy. But the fundamental question is, how do we get back to the Supreme Court? What vehicle? Because they are a court of last resort. They are a court of the highest appellate authority, right? They don't try cases. They take records that are brought up to them through emergency applications or writ of certiorari. And the question is it going to be by a class action? Meaning, does a federal judge like Boasberg in the District of Columbia certify a class, like, let's say, the 250 people who were sent off to El Salvador without due process, and say that everybody that's in that class, I'm going to enter a temporary restraining order. So a temporary restraining order plus a class action is basically the equivalent of a nationwide injunction for one party. And that was the argument that even like Ketanji Brown Jackson and Amy Coney Barrett brought up. Like, what does it matter to you, Solicitor General, Trump administration? You end up in the same place. Well, he didn't really have a great answer. Sauer was not on his game today. I'll leave it at that. Sauer was not on his game. He got grilled by Kagan, for instance, mercilessly about, you're on a losing streak. You've lost all 4 major cases about birthright citizenship. What makes you think you're going to win any of the cases? And then what is your incentive to even bring a case up to the United States Supreme Court under your working theory that an individual judge can't enter an injunction? We got to wait around for class action status, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Then you have this very meek John Roberts, the Chief Justice, say, well, we could move faster if we needed to. We could issue orders in the middle of the night if we needed to. But will you? You control your own docket. You control your own process at the Supreme Court. But will you? So at the end of the day, when all the John Sowers of the world have left is talking about slavery, in 2025, that's sort of a losing argument. I thought the Solicitor General for New Jersey, Feigenbaum, did very well today. He's young. He's only been around for 10 years out of law school. I thought he did a masterful job. And also Ms. Corcoran, who is a professor at Georgetown University, runs a law institute there, a constitutional law institute. I thought she did a masterful job as well, answering the questions. And some of the frustration that people heard or saw in the oral argument, and we'll put the oral argument, it's right now in Legal AF under live. You can find the oral argument. We'll put it in Substack as well. Frustration is not with the advocates. John Sauer, it was with the advocate. But for the other two, it wasn't with the advocates when you heard frustration. It was that the Supreme Court justices want to talk to each other. And they're trying to lobby each other and advocate to each other. And in order to do that, they try to do it through the advocate. If they can't get the advocate to make the argument they want, they get a little frustrated. No, that's not my point. This is the point I want you to express and amplify. And but that's all just sort of kabuki theater through the United States Supreme Court. Come back here to Legal AF, hit the subscribe button, set your reminders. In about a month or two before the summer is over, midway through the summer, there will be an opinion about this case. And you can then roll this tape back and see if I was right. Are they going to allow nationwide injunctions, but with some limitations? Are they going to somehow address birthright citizenship? I don't think so, but by the nationwide injunctions, they will. And who's going to write the opinion, and what guidance is it going to give to the lower courts? Come back to Legal AF here, Legal AF, the podcast and the Midas Touch Network, Legal AF, the Substack. So many different ways to get your Legal AF every day. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event, by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states, and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.